Hello, hello. I was supposed to have a really lovely guest joining this week, but she had an accident bringing horses in and will not be joining. I look forward to having her join in the new year when we reschedule. But I wanted to take this opportunity to talk a little bit more about my kidney transplants, three, plural. And this past Tuesday was actually the 6-year anniversary of my third kidney transplant. And it ends up being a fairly interesting topic to people who haven't lived it. But it's there's a lot to be said for that experience. I was diagnosed with kidney failure when I was 7 and had my first transplant by the time I was 8. And my first donor was my mom's aunt, my great aunt. And my second donor was my mom's cousin's wife. So not exactly blood related, but still in the family and very, very special. And then my third donor was a deceased donor who I don't know. So that was the first time I kind of got it from the system instead of having that connection with someone. So that's something I want to touch on because that was a very different experience for me. Like when I had my first transplant when I was 8, like that was a very celebrated thing, like this amazing. And it's actually mind boggling. That's one of the things that's so interesting is like, that's just kind of how I grew up of like, yes, here, take my organ and we love you and we want you to be well. So here, take my organ. So I kind of forget sometimes that's, I know it's an amazing thing, but like that's miraculous that these people literally went into surgery. They essentially put themselves in kidney failure because then you just have one kidney, which you're fine to live off of, but it's not a big deal. And I just grew up with people being so willing to cut their bodies open and give me a piece of them that it wasn't until I was an adult where I could really truly appreciate how mind-blowing that is that I not only had that happen once but twice and had more people in my life that went and got tested and were more than willing and happy and wanted to do that for me. So that's something that I would say like was lost on me a little bit. And as I've gotten older, I can appreciate how big of a deal that is. But growing up, yeah, it was just here, have my kidney. Please take it. Do what you want with it. So I had a very special, have a very special relationship with my first donor. And uh, it, it's weird because you, like, I have pieces of these people literally in me. And when I was younger and with my second transplant too, like that was such a celebrated thing. Like the anniversary of that was such a huge thing. Like we would send each other gifts and like we would go out to dinner and like it was a huge celebrated thing, but it's so different with my third donor. And 6 years later, I've come to terms with it a little bit more, but like someone lost their life in order for me to get that kidney. And that took a while for me to not necessarily wrap my head around because I understand it, but to come to terms with that. Like I got the call for me to come in potentially. They had a potential donor for me. And I got the call on November 4th. And November 4th was the worst day of someone's life. They got a call that their loved one had been in a car accident and they were on life support and they made the decision to end life support and donate their loved one's organs. And that is so not lost on me. That, well, it was one of the most celebrated days of my life getting that call. It's just two completely different ends of the spectrum. So I always keep November 4th for my donor, who I know very little about. They actually told me the wrong information. I guess there was 3 different transplants calls that went out that day. So I actually received the wrong information about my donor. I was told that they were within a decade of my life. They were male, and they had been in a car accident. That's what I knew. So the car accident part was still correct, but my donor was more in their late 50s, early 60s, I think, if I remember correctly. But you were not given any further information than that. But they were male, older, but healthy. I never got in contact with some, like, you can go through the transplant coordinator and send the family a letter. They can send you a letter with like it's screened very carefully to make sure that you are not giving away any potential information that would identify yourself. They keep that very, very, very separate. And I had no communication with that donor family. I think about it, like I don't know if that would bring them comfort to know what this kidney has done for me. It was a fucking shit show initially, but like now 6 years later, it's a absolute miracle kidney that it's still functioning the way that it is. But it's a different experience to go from having it be like this whole celebration in your family of the anniversary of that kidney transplant, to have that personal connection and to know that person and to have that person be a part of you. It's very, very different going from that to a deceased donor. And most people's experience is a deceased donor, I would say. So it was very different for me. But the reason it's so challenging to find so many different donors, so like the first time you have a transplant, or some people just have the one, I'm a rarity, but you need the blood type to match, you need the antibodies in your blood to get along with your donor antibodies. So once you have that, you kind of adapt those person's antibodies. And then the reason my first transplant, the timelines are a little blurry, 9, 10, 11-ish years, something around that, 10, I think, which is pretty average, or at least used to be the average. I think the average is hopefully better now, but that 10 years was pretty average for a kidney to last, a transplanted kidney to last. So I got a good chunk out of my first one, but slowly over time, your body starts to create antibodies that kind of realize that there's a foreign body in your body, and they start to just slowly attack it. So you just slowly start to reject that kidney. And you're on anti-rejection meds, you're on all of those things so that your body doesn't attack the kidney. That's why transplant patients have compromised immune systems, because they keep our immune system compromised on purpose so that your body doesn't realize that you have this foreign object in there that it decides it doesn't want when you really, really want it. So yeah, my first kidney lasted about 10 years, and then slowly my body started to reject that kidney. So then when they're looking to get you a second one, you need antibodies that your body has not been exposed to. So you still need the same blood type or compatible blood type, but then they have to take a look at the antibodies that my body is currently rejecting right now. We need different antibodies so that your body doesn't eat the fresh meat, basically, which I realize is a really cringy way to say it, but that's why they end up keeping the transplanted kidneys in. So I technically have 5 kidneys in my body. Only one of them is plugged in. So I still have my native kidneys, which are like super shriveled up. They're smaller than raisins. It takes a very skilled technician to find them on an ultrasound. I still have my first transplanted kidney in there as well. It has, again, started to shrivel because it's not plugged into anything. And then I have my second kidney transplant in there too, plus the third. So they keep shoving them in there. But the second transplant, they need to find antibodies that I have not been exposed to. So that was my mom's cousin's wife, was a really lovely match. That transplant came with they all came with complications because it's me, but I do not honestly remember the order of things. That part of my life is still blurry, very blurry, but my donor kidney was positive for EBV, which is kind of like the same family, same virus as mono. I somehow managed to go my entire immune compromised life without being exposed to EBV. So they put you on a medication to stop you from getting EBV from your donated kidney. That being on that medication that was preventing that made my white blood cells drop, my blood cell level drop, and I ended up with Pseudomonas, which you probably haven't heard of because mainly it's just a problem for like children in third world countries. So it was a very nasty infection in my leg. So they ended up taking me off of the medication that was preventing EBV to boost my white blood cell count back up. And so it did, I boosted it back up, but then I ended up getting EBV from my donated kidney because I was off of that medication. So I was quite sick with that EBV virus. And then EBV is also a little complicated like connection, but I ended up getting meningitis because of the EBV. And then they were worried for a period of time that I had meningitis can lead to lymphoma. So they were concerned about lymphoma, did not end up having lymphoma, but did have meningitis, was very sick. There's like days in my life that I don't remember from that experience. This all happened in second year university is when I had my second transplant. So it was a hot mess. I was in the hospital for not quite as long as I was with the GBF, but I was in there for I don't remember, to be honest. And then there was another bout in that same year where I started to reject my kidney a little bit. I had a bout of rejection. So then they increased my anti-rejection meds that again caused my white blood cell count to drop. So I ended up with another infection. So it's such a hard balance to find enough medications so that you don't reject your kidneys, but not so much that you suffer through everything else. I also, within a very short amount of time, ended up with a UTI, a bladder infection that really quickly turned into a kidney infection. So I was also quite sick from that. This all happened within a very short period of time. And then that, I think I got about 6 years out of that kidney, which is like with all the shit that happened to that kidney, it's remarkable that I was able to get through 6 years with that. And then that brings us to, I think I want to say 2018. And I ended up on dialysis before my first transplant for a very short amount of time when I was 7 going on 8. That was a shit show. My mom's an absolute champ for doing that at home. It was not as high tech as it is now. And it did not go well. None of it went well. So I do remember a fair amount of that. I wish I didn't, but I do remember a fair amount of that. So the second time I ended up on dialysis was between the second kidney transplant and the third kidney transplant. So that's why I have a fistula in my left arm where they fuse the vein and the artery to create like a mega vein. And that's where I did dialysis out of. They thought I would be on dialysis for a very long time because again, when they're looking for that third kidney transplant, they need antibodies that I have not been exposed to from my natural body, from my first donor, and then my second donor. So it was like a 3% chance, or 3% of the population would have antibodies that I hadn't been exposed to. And things that can make up antibodies are like your environment. So they were pretty sure I would not necessarily get a kidney from like Ontario or people who are close to me. So yeah, I think it was out, they said the West Coast is where this kidney came from, but they assumed I would be on dialysis for a really long time because they were looking for a needle in a haystack of antibodies that I had not been exposed to. So I thought I was in that for the long haul. Both experiences with me with dialysis sucked. I know some people, not that they enjoy it, but they don't seem to hate it as much as I did. There are a million other things I would rather do instead of that ever again. But I forget how long, it wasn't very long. I'm pretty sure I got my fistula in July of 2018. I started dialysis in September, and then I had my transplant by November 5th. And they thought it would be years and years and years of me on dialysis. So like, it was absolutely unreal that I was able to get that donated so quickly. But with that being said, it was not for lack of complications. So So it's not funny, but like if you don't laugh, what do you do? So my donor kidney was CMV positive. CMV is kind of within the same type of family as like mono. Like most kids get it at some point in like public school. You have a couple of days where you're feeling unwell, and then your normal immune system's fine. They are finding more and more transplants or transplanted patients are having trouble with CMV. I ended up in the hospital for a while, treating CMV too. A while. Like I fought CMV longer than I was on dialysis. Like it was a shit show. Same thing, like they started me on medication to prevent that. I was having complications from being on that medication. So then they took me off of it, and there's your CMV. So yeah, they did like the normal course of treatment for that. That wasn't working. They ended up having to import medication from the States and like get special like permission to bring this medication in. That was heavy duty, like very heavy duty, like glove, mask, gown when you're executing that medication. And because we had treated CMV for so long and was on such harsh medication, that's when I ended up getting the Guillain-Barré syndrome, the GBS, because my system was just so done. It was so done. But as a result of all of that shit taking place, they ended up taking me off of my anti-rejection meds to give my immune system a fighting chance to just get rid of the CMV on its own to help me recover through GBS. And I've been off of them ever since. So it basically, like when they decided to take me off of the anti-rejection meds, it felt like a death sentence. Like I was like, I'm going back on dialysis. Like this transplanted kidney was more trouble than it was worth, is what my thought was at the time. And dialysis sucked so much that still feels like a bit of a death sentence to me. We'll deal with it if we have to, but 6 years later, I'm not on any anti-rejection meds, which no one fully understands, but we're all just kind of going with it. It does absolutely kind of leave you in you as me, like constant fear of like waiting for that shoe to drop. And it's hard because like at the same time, you can look at it like you could get hit by a bus. You could like shit happens. Like I know you can't always just live your life waiting for the other shoe to drop. So it's a fine balance for me of being realistic and aware of my situation, but not trying to not let that affect how I live my life. So I'm still very cautious. I'm careful of what I put in my body and how well I treat my body. I try to eat well. I try to drink enough water. I try to get rest. I try to honor my body as much as I can. Some days more successfully than others. It's a balance that seems to be working. So, okay. I've worked very, very hard to, knock on wood, not get sick. So I still wear a mask if I go out anywhere, not necessarily just because of COVID, but because like, fuck, my body's been through enough. Like I don't want to get sick and have that be the tipping point where my body realizes that we've been teetering on this really fine line. I don't want that. So I still wear a mask. I'm very, very unbelievably grateful for like the clients that come into my home studio. If they're unwell, they cancel. I have some people like flu, cold season, like amped back up. They just started wearing masks again without me saying anything. I still don't require it of them. If they're unwell, they just shouldn't be here, but they just do it because, and like, but who else can say that? It's, I'm very, very honored. To have the people in my life that I do that take care of me. It's a very big deal. But yeah, it's been a trip, and I can still have this conversation in a fairly like obviously like monotoned. Like I just kind of I'm still very disassociated. Like I know these things happened to me, but I can still, when I talk about it, be still fairly removed from it, which has its pros and cons. That's something that I'm like, that has taken a very long time because again, we started this journey at age 7. So my brain figured out how to protect me from the horrors that is my life. Like those are the like main points in there. But like I also have Harrington rods in my spine from scoliosis. I had my adenoids removed for no reason, may I add. They thought I had issues with sinusitis. Fun fact, I had stress headaches. They did not need to remove them. So that there's been always lots of like hiccups in there. I'm pretty sure I've seen most departments in the hospital for things. I was on the infectious disease VIP list for a while for for CMV and EBV and all that. But I think the biggest takeaway that I want to talk about is not even necessarily like yeah, like I've been through some shit. People seem to find that interesting, but organ donation, blood donation, all of those things that I know like the advertisements are sometimes so cringy, the gift of life, but like y'all like actually give the gift of life. Blood donation is just such a small way to do that. Like for me, again, with all the antibodies that I've had in my system, when I did have my back surgery, I donated my own blood ahead of time because I can't have any more antibodies introduced to my body. So donating blood, donating plasma, like becoming a registered organ donor so that if/when you do pass away, depending on the circumstance, someone else might get 6+ years out of their life for, but there's no words. Like when you say you give the gift of life, like literally you give that person their life back. Whether it's kidney, liver, heart, whatever it may be. It's again, not lost on me that everyone has their own beliefs with that. Like well, I remember one of the shirts that they had for like advertising about organ donation, like really like sure, but I remember they were like, don't take your organs to heaven, God knows we need them here or something. I was like, that's that's a bit touchy. But I know it depends on your beliefs. I tend to view death quite, I don't know, maybe like literally, I don't know what you want to call it. Like even like when Dickens passed away, like, yes, that was upsetting for me to watch. And like, I didn't want to be there when his body was removed, but like, that wasn't Dickens anymore. And I believe that for humans too, like you being buried with your organs doesn't serve anybody. Which I realize is a personal choice, but without my 2 kidney donors, living donors, and without the family who made that decision with their loved one to donate his organs, like my life is very limited living on dialysis, being fucking miserable. So I'm very grateful that those 3 people in just my life made that decision to save mine. That's huge. So yeah, just some insight into what that means for someone who needs an organ. We have the science, we have the ability to literally take an organ out of someone and put it in somebody else and have them, like, it's Frankenstein-y, but like, what, it's so cool. It's so cool that we figured out how to do this. And I know there's lots of new technology coming out with like pig and cow organs and all of that. And that would potentially be an interesting conversation for myself as a vegetarian. I don't know how I feel about that. But give me a pig kidney over dialysis any day. Hell yeah. But anyways, I just wanted to spread a little bit of that awareness, because I think it's not talked about enough, that I even like, I know some provinces and states or whatever are now just doing implied organ donation versus like you having to opt in, you have to actually opt out, which I think is really, really great. because a lot of people, it's just, they don't think about it, or it's a laziness thing to register. So if you're already registered, automatic registration, that would, in my opinion, be a good move. But if anyone ever has any questions about that, or if you know someone who's going through something similar, I am always available to chat, and hopefully they don't go through the amount of complications that I have. Cause like I'm a unicorn. It's a rarity. But if you haven't registered as an organ donor, if you are capable and able to donate blood, maybe start to make that a bit of a priority if you can, because all of us on the receiving end appreciate that more than we can ever express.